I was smoothing the crease on a linen napkin when my granddaughter, Maya, tugged my sleeve. She didn't look up, just stared at the dessert station across the ballroom, her little hand trembling in mine. "Grandma," she whispered, "promise you won't look under the linen." For a moment, everything around us, music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, just stopped. I've heard every kind of voice in my life, defiant, broken, guilty, but never one like that. A whisper that's small can carry a truth big enough to break you. "Under which linen, sweetheart?" I asked. She pressed my palm harder. "Please don't, Grandma. Just don't." Across the Riverstone Inn's glittering hall, chandeliers poured golden light over smiling strangers. My son was laughing with guests, proud of the new life he'd built, and his fiancée was posing for cameras as if the world belonged to her. Everything looked perfect, which is exactly when life likes to lie. I bent to pick up my clutch, pretending to adjust my shoe, and lifted the edge of the white tablecloth just an inch. There, in the shadow, something bright flashed orange. A laminated pass. A staff lanyard. Not ours. Not supposed to be there. Maya's grip tightened. "Grandma, please," she breathed. I let the linen fall and smiled the way only grandmothers can when they already know something's wrong. "Okay, my love," I said softly. "We'll do this my way." Because when a child's whisper goes quiet, the whole world should start listening. People call me Eleanor Harper. Around this valley, they still slip and say judge because habits outlive the uniforms we hang up. I retired from family court 5 years ago with a stack of notebooks full of scribbles and a garden that has more opinions than I do. Tonight, though, I wore a silver clutch and my better shoes because I promised my son I would help host his daughter through an evening she hadn't asked for. Caleb looked good in the navy suit we bought for him after his promotion last spring. He hates the way it pulls at the shoulders when he lifts his arms to shake hands, but it photographs handsome, and that matters to people who sponsor harvest galas along the Hudson. He had that glow men get when they're building something they can point to and say, "I made that lift off the paper." Beside him, Riley Hart moved through conversations the way a boat cuts the wake it made 3 seconds earlier. I have watched a lot of Charm, and I know the difference between natural light and the kind that comes from a well-placed lamp. Riley's smile could pass inspection at 10 feet and on a billboard. The question is always what it looks like at 18 inches. "Isn't this place a miracle?" she said when she reached us, her voice pitched to belong to anyone in the room who might be listening. They turned a river inn into a cathedral. "Cathedral is a strong word for a dining room," I said, and she laughed with perfect moderation, as if she had a tasting spoon for every reaction. She leaned down to Maya. "There's a dessert parade later. You're going to love it. Our pastry chef is doing something special for the kids Maya didn't answer. She had the little stuffed rabbit she takes everywhere tucked under her arm, ears gone thin from too much affection. When thunder rattles the windows at home in Beacon, she counts between the flash and the sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, like someone paying out string to a kite. Tonight she was counting people. Her mouth moved with the numbers, and I caught a 4 and a 5. Then her eyes slid back to the dessert station as if it might look back. I watched her bracelet catch the light with every turn of her wrist, a bright teal band with a little emblem, her medical alert. She chose the color. She told me once it looked like the top of the river by Dennings Point when the wind runs a fingertip over the surface. It was there. It was fastened. I filed that away the way I file the way the air changes a beat before a summer storm slips over the ridge. A young line cook in a Riverstone cap hustled past our table, a stack of kitchen tickets in his hand, still warm from a printer. He wore an orange lanyard around his neck, a laminated pass bouncing against his chest. As he hurried past me, a second orange lanyard slid from the crook of his elbow and dropped to the carpet with a small plastic click. "Careful," I said, bending before he could, and picked it up. The laminate was glossy and heavy in my palm. "All access, VIP tasting," it read. A name had been written in thick marker and then scribbled out so vigorously the plastic had scuffed. Underneath, someone had written a fresh name in new ink. The handwriting was different. The ink looked too shiny to have dried fully. "Thanks, ma'am," the cook said, reaching as if the pass were a hot pan. "Lots of all access tonight?" I asked. He hesitated, a flit of worry touching his eyes and moving on. "More than usual." "Special donors." He pointed the top of his chin toward the dessert station. "They want photos of the parade." "Of course they do." I kept my tone light. I tucked the second lanyard into his hand and watched him disappear into the corridor that leads to the kitchen, swinging doors taking the air with them. I waited one long breath and then lifted the edge of our tablecloth again as if searching for a dropped earring. The first orange lanyard stared up at me from shadow, stage bright and ordinary. I slid it toward me with 2 fingers, folded the linen back down, and laid the pass flat in my lap. It was identical to the one I had just returned. Empty name field, a number. "Are we going home?" Maya asked, her voice small enough to sit in one cupped hand. "Not yet," I said. "We will if we need to." "We'll do something first." Caleb rejoined us with a flush in his cheeks and 3 new business cards in his breast pocket. He looked from me to Maya to the empty space at the head of our table and frowned in that way a son frowns when he recognizes his mother's concentration. "Everything good?" "We're going to speak with Mrs. Whitcomb," I said. Mrs. Whitcomb had been the gala director since before I learned where they store the folding chairs. "Then we'll see." Riley drifted back to us, a hand already reaching for Maya's shoulder with a softness calibrated for the camera. "Everyone's headed to the mural for family photos. It'll take 5 minutes. After I speak with the director," I said. "About what?" The smile never left her mouth, but something behind it tightened a fraction. "About who has all access to my granddaughter's plate." The tightening froze, then thawed. "Nell," she said, rehearsed kindness rounding my name. "The kitchen has everything under control. We worked with them all week, so did I said. "I'll be right back." The Riverstone has a hallway to the kitchen that smells like lemon oil and old wallpaper. I know the habits of service corridors. They are the veins in a building's body, carrying urgency and secrets as easily as soup. I had taken 3 steps into the dim when a voice called my name. Mrs. Whitcomb materialized from a side door wearing the kind of headset that never musses a perfect chignon. "Judge Harper," she said, greeting me as if we had just left a committee meeting. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Eleanor will do," I said. "Could you tell me how you're handling dietary indicators tonight?" She brightened. "We've color-coded bands for guests who want the staff to be aware. Green for a flagged item, purple for dairy-free, blue for vegetarian, white for general admission. Back of house uses orange, all access passes so nobody blocks them while they're doing their work." I held up the 2 orange lanyards, the one from the carpet and the one from the table shadow. "Would it surprise you to hear that these 2 were discovered outside of your staff?" Her face did something I have seen in courtrooms and kitchens alike. Every inch of pleasant expression stayed in place while the mind behind it moved at double speed. She took the laminates, flipped them over, looked at the corners where the lamination can bubble if somebody has been careless. "These are printed 1-to-1 and marked in our log," she said. "We should have 7 in circulation tonight. If we have more, I want to know how, if someone wanted to change a note on a kitchen ticket mid-service," I asked, "how would that appear?" "It shouldn't," she said. "Tickets print with timestamps and order flows. We log revisions." She lowered her voice. Sometimes when a donor insists, a staffer might be told to accommodate. It's not our policy to do so on matters of safety. It is sometimes our practice to smile while saying no. "Then tonight," I said, "I'd appreciate it if you smiled while counting your orange passes and checking who is carrying them." She touched her headset and spoke quietly to someone named Cole, asked for a live count on Orange All Access, asked Pastry to verify the badges they had set aside for a photo station. The heat washed over me as I slipped a shoulder through the swinging doors. Kitchens are their own weather system. Steam softened the air, steel flashed from the pass, and the ticket printer chattered like a nervous clerk. A cook called a pickup with the cadence of someone whose whole life lives inside 5 shouted words. The pastry station hissed in a whispery way that brings a room together at the end. A young man with careful hands stopped when he caught me at the line's edge. "Ma'am, you can't." "I won't move another step," I said. "You look like the person who can answer this. Who handed you a ticket with a revised note?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The whites of his eyes flashed toward pastry and back. Arturo was stitched on his jacket in blue thread, neat as a pen stroke. "I'm not here to get anybody in trouble," I said. "I'm here to make sure a 7-year-old doesn't become an anecdote." "I need a truth, not a story." He swallowed. "Runner. From the ballroom. Orange badge. Name?" We don't ask names. They're in and out. But she was blonde. Hair that doesn't move when you turn your head. Smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She said to make it photogenic. "Photogenic how?" I asked, and he shook his head. I let the question fall. I knew enough. You don't pull threads you don't need when you already have the seam. "Arturo," I said, "if anyone wonders, I was never here." He almost smiled. "Understood, Judge." The first beads of sweat gathered at my temples as I stepped back through the doors into air that suddenly felt too cool for what I was carrying. The hallway framed a black and white photo of the Riverstone from 60 years ago, waitresses in crisp aprons and a chef smoking by the back door. Buildings remember what they were taught. This one had been taught to be a people place. The best ones hold you to it. Riley found me before I found our table. Her smile was turned a degree down now, concern calibrating itself. "You disappeared. Mrs. Whitcomb was looking for you to talk about seating. Mrs. Whitcomb and I covered it," I said, and stepped past her shoulder. When I reached our table, the space where Maya's teal bracelet should have made its little river-colored glint was empty. "Where is your band, honey?" I asked. Maya bit her lip. "It was scratchy," she said, small and apologetic, as if comfort were a rule she had broken. "Ms. Riley said she'd fix the clasp so it doesn't pinch. She said it's better to tuck it under the napkin." "Which napkin?" I said. She pointed to the edge of the table where an extra linen had been folded with hotel precision. I lifted it. The broken plastic clasp lay underneath like a tooth a child had put under a pillow, waiting for someone to come along and turn a little bit of pain into a prize. The band itself was gone. Riley arrived with the speed of a person whose whole life depends on being exactly where they need to be, half a second after they're needed. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Where is my granddaughter's medical band?" I asked. She blinked. "Oh, it must have slipped. I'll fetch another." She turned as if to move. "You'll stay," I said. "We'll find it." A gentle voice I recognized from a parent-teacher night hovered at my shoulder. "Tessa Monroe teaches counseling at Maya's school and volunteers with the Valley Literacy Program. She shouldn't have been here necessarily, except she belongs to everything that tries to make children feel like citizens." "I saw something earlier," she said, dropping her voice. "A server tried to put a dessert at your place with a different name card. I thought the cards had shifted, so I sent it back. I didn't want to embarrass anyone." She glanced at Riley and back. It felt off. "You did the right thing," I said. "Would you stand near the director when I have to ask for help?" Tessa nodded. She has the kind of quiet that hardens like an oak if you lean against it the wrong way. The music softened. Staff began to form a line at the ballroom entrance, silver trays in their hands like moonlight captured. A little bell chimed. People turned toward the aisle between tables. A few reached for their phones, cameras waking with soft chirps. I stood and my chair made a sound against the carpet that might as well have been a gavel. "Before dessert," I said, not raising my voice so much as aiming it, "I have a point of order." Rooms like that remember courtrooms, even if they have never held one. The hush that fell wasn't absolute. The band still breathed. Forks still sighed across china. It was the kind of quiet that gives you permission to find out what you want to be. Mrs. Whitcomb met my eyes from across the room and, to her credit, walked straight to me with a wireless microphone. She didn't ask if I was sure. She handed me the mic the way someone hands over a duty we all agree exists, even if we would rather not see it performed in a tuxedo. "I'm Eleanor Harper," I said, placing the microphone close enough that my throat felt like it had company. "Some of you know me. I don't love speeches. I love facts. Here are a few." I held up the orange lanyard I had found beneath our table. "These are all access badges for staff tonight. 7 were printed and logged. There are 9 in circulation, and 2 were found away from staff." A ripple traveled through the room the way wind travels over a cornfield. It doesn't look like anything until you notice every stalk has bent a fraction in the same direction. I lifted a kitchen ticket onto my palm. This is a back-of-house ticket with a revision that doesn't match the log. It came with an instruction to worry about how something looked more than what it meant. I kept my voice level and let the words put on their own winter coats. "Finally, a child at this table is missing a medical band." I opened my other hand where the broken plastic clasp lay. The clasp is here. The band is not. If a person truly believes it is a misunderstanding, they rush to explain because relief has no manners. If a person is deciding which story to tell first, they take half a breath too long and you can watch them spend it. Riley smiled. I don't know what you call a smile that is all hinge and no door, but that's what it was. "Nell," she said, "this is beneath you. You're turning a party into a witch hunt. If anyone misplaced something, it will turn up. The kitchen is busy. Mistakes happen. You're making donors uncomfortable." "Rooms like this aren't built for comfort," I said. "They're built for decisions." I nodded to Mrs. Whitcomb. She moved her hand in 2 small circles, and people I hadn't noticed in her orbit made themselves visible in the space between tables. One checked orange badges. Another slipped toward the kitchen with the efficiency of a thought you mean to keep. A third positioned herself near the doors. "Arturo," Mrs. Whitcomb called. The line cook from the past stepped into view with the kind of reluctance you only see in people who know how to tell the truth and hate when it's their turn. "Tell them what you told me," I said, because it is more merciful to offer someone a ladder than to push them into the pool. He did. He didn't embroider. He listed facts, what he was handed, what it looked like, who delivered it, and the words that piggyback on instruction when someone is more interested in a photograph than an outcome. The description was not precise enough for gossip, but accurate enough for a conscience. I have seen good performers hold a smile like a pose until their muscles shake. It's impressive and sad. Riley held it through the first sentence and most of the second. It faltered on the third, not much, just the tiniest slip at one corner, and then it rallied like a gymnast who bobbles on the beam and pretends they meant to do that. "Judge Harper," she said brightly, hanging my old title around my neck like a lei, "I think you're seeing patterns where there are none. You have always been passionate about protecting children. I respect that. This is not that. It is exactly that," I said, "and you know it." Behind Riley, her PR handler hovered the way a shadow hovers at the edge of any strong light. I'd noticed the woman earlier, all competence and neutral tones, hands joined in front of her as if holding a bowl nobody else could see. Now her face had gone the color that paper turns when it's been sitting in a sunny window for a year. She opened her mouth and nothing came. She tried again. "She told me to swap the lanyards," the woman said. "She told me to keep media away from the children's station and to make sure certain plates landed where she wanted them. She told me to keep the band out of the shot." The room did the inhale people do when they mean to speak and decide to keep that sound instead of words. Riley turned so slowly you could have counted between each degree of arc. "You must be exhausted," she said, crisp and low, which is how control sounds when it is stripped of its paint. The handler, Margot, I remembered, kept her eyes on me. "I'm not exhausted," she said. "I'm aware. Please recover the missing band," I told Mrs. Whitcomb. "If it's in the house, find it." Security peeled off in pairs as if they had practiced this, which perhaps they had in other forms. You learn in a valley like ours that the same choreography solves different problems if you're careful. Caleb stepped forward at last, and when he spoke, it made something in my chest ache because I remember his voice when it still tripped over its own shoelaces. "Riley," he said, "did you touch my daughter's band?" She paused just long enough to measure the space between what had already happened and what could be salvaged. "Absolutely not," she said. "Did you instruct anyone to?" he asked. The room didn't quite tilt, but the kind of quiet that forms when a room chooses shame over confusion moved in and sat down. She didn't answer, and sometimes a silence is a statement that doesn't require a court reporter to transcribe. "We're done with dessert," I said to Mrs. Whitcomb. "Thank you for the music." "We've heard enough." She nodded once. It was the kind of nod that would steady a glass on a moving train. Servers turned. Trays paused. Then they flowed back toward the kitchen the way a tide knows its obligations. No one complained. A few people looked relieved in the way those who did not understand anything still understand the relief that a decision has been made. Security came back with a small linen-lined box. Inside lay the teal band, folded gently, as if a napkin could make a thing clean if you asked it politely. They'd found it in a storage drawer with spare linens, tucked away with casual ceremony. I fastened the band around Maya's wrist myself. She held still like a fawn that trusts the hand because the hand has never heard it. "Too tight?" I asked. She shook her head. "Just right." Riley left the room escorted, not in spectacle and not in shame. The door closed behind her with the same sound it had made all evening. Caleb didn't move for a long moment after that, as if his spine were the rope in a tug-of-war between having been fooled and having chosen to be. I have watched a lot of men lose to that contest and learn more from that loss than any victory would have taught them. Mrs. Whitcomb apologized for the interruption with a grace that reminded the room why we had come in the first place. She announced that a portion of the evening's funds would be directed to children's health advocacy in the valley. It didn't sound like a stunt. It sounded like an adjustment to the sales. Tessa squeezed my arm when she passed. "If you ever run for anything again," she said, "you'll win by daylight." "I'm too old to run," I said. "I prefer to stand." Maya let out a breath that I had not realized she had been holding since she asked me for that promise by our table. "Grandma," she said. "Yes, love." "You looked under the linen." "I did," I said, "and I'm glad I didn't promise not to." On the drive home, the river pulled moonlight into thin threads. The road from the inn to Beacon is a ribbon that has learned the patience of stone fences and stubborn hills. Maya fell asleep with her rabbit on her chest, the teal band snug against her skin. Caleb drove with both hands at 10 and 2, as if the wheel might try to argue with him if he didn't show it respect. "I thought I was doing a good thing," he said after a long time. He didn't say Riley's name. There are nights when names are less useful than the holes they leave behind. "I thought this was how you build a life again. You smile, you show up, you make a list of what a person should be, and then you find someone who can read." "You were doing a good thing," I said. "Building a life again and measuring yourself are both good things, but you measure yourself against your child, not your reflection." He nodded like a man whose neck hurt. "I let other people manage my attention." "That's a generous way of saying you gave it away," I said. "Generosity is a gift to the right recipient. To the wrong one, it's just something to put in a drawer and lose." At home, the old house breathed the way old houses do, settling into the night, creaking like a memory being careful with its weight. I made chamomile and set one mug in front of Caleb, which he cradled but didn't drink. I carried another upstairs to Maya's room because there is no remedy for a day like that, just practices that remind the body it knows how to sleep. She woke enough to tell me that the hallway light needed to stay on in case the storm forgot where to go. "Storms rarely forget," I said. "People do." Downstairs, Caleb stared at the knot in the kitchen table that looks like a map of the river. He'd traced it with a toy car 1,000 times, navigating his way from Newburgh to Cold Spring, like a boy who always wanted to know where the road would turn next. "How did you know?" he asked. "Tonight, I mean. It felt like you saw it before anyone else did. I didn't know," I said. "I listened." To the wrong color hanging from a neck where it didn't belong, to a ticket printed at a time that didn't make sense, to a child asking for a promise that didn't match the request. You stack enough small truths, and they build something you can step on. He leaned back and covered his eyes with the heels of his hands. I wanted to believe I could start over. "You can," I said. "You start with your daughter." He nodded without looking at me. "I'm going to call Miss Monroe in the morning," he said. "Thank her. Ask if the school needs anything. Start with thanks," I said. "Someone who knows how to stand at the right time keeps a town upright." He cleared his throat. "I should also call Mrs. Whitcomb, and Arturo, and the staff." He winced at his own list. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize to me," I said. "Apologize to your own good sense and then invite it to sit at the head of the table again." I slept a little and dreamed of a field of linen, waving like flags in a wind too soft to see. In the morning, the house made coffee like an act of faith. Maya padded into the kitchen with bed hair and a grin, the kind children reserve for the hour there is nothing on the calendar but cartoons and pancakes. She held out her wrist to show me the band, tugged the teal snug and whispered, "Just right," as if trying the words on to see if they would be large enough to grow into. The call started as soon as the valley woke up. Some people wanted to scold, using words like decorum and spectacle, the way people use umbrella terms for rain when what they mean is, "I got wet and don't care to admit I didn't check the forecast." Others wanted to praise, which is fine but doesn't change the price of eggs. A few wanted to tell stories of their own, evenings at churches and county fairs when the room almost slipped sideways and only righted, because someone said out loud what everyone else had chosen to step around. I asked for a list of the staff who had been pulled into the mess and wrote to each one. I asked Caleb to sign the letters with me. He did, and we drove them over one afternoon, hand-delivering notes in the back dining room where the staff eat their meal standing, leaning hip against stainless steel. Arturo folded the paper carefully before tucking it into his phone case, as if phones still swallowed letters and music when you slipped them into their cores. I ran into Margot downtown a week later. She'd resigned, not because she didn't need the money, but because sometimes you close a door before someone slams it in your face just to remind yourself your hands still work. She had a paper cup with a coffee shop's logo on it and a look that had learned to stare at the middle distance in a way that made the rest of us feel like we were in her periphery, not her absence. "I'm sorry you had to be the one," she said. "I'm not," I answered. "Being the one is ugly work most days, but it's honest." She studied my face like I'd said something she hoped to agree with when she gets there. I can't believe I followed instructions that made my stomach flip. "You can," I said, "because there is no use lying to a woman you'd like to be useful to later. Next time, follow the flip." At school, Tessa found me at pickup with a stack of brochures for a program that trains volunteers to sit with new families while they enroll, helping them read forms that assume too much and forgive too little. "I'd like your voice there," she said. "It is the opposite of a microphone." "That's a compliment," I said. "It is," she answered. Riley's name passed through the valley for a while like a leaf in a river, spinning in eddies of rumor and arriving here and there in the reeds. I didn't help it along. There's a difference between protecting a child and burning down a person to watch the light. The law taught me that. So did 2 children and a garden that will forgive you for a week and make you pay the next one when you ignore it. On a Saturday, Maya sat at my kitchen table drawing. She had sorted the crayons so that every color made her eyes happy next to the one on either side. "What's that?" I asked. "Us," she said, "at the gala." I braced myself. Children's art has a way of telling the truth with too few lines for comfort. but she had drawn us small and centered, holding hands, our tablecloth a little ocean with our shoes like boats. The dessert station sat off to the right, tall and bright. The band was 3 circles for heads and lines for instruments. The orange lanyard was a small rectangle on the floor. She had not drawn a face for it. "What's that?" I asked, pointing gently. "That's a card you pick up when the floor is messy," she said, "so nobody slips." "Exactly," I said. In the evenings, I walk down to the river to see what the light is doing and let my bones remember how to carry me without my mind barking orders at them. On the far side of the water, the hills turn themselves the colors of good bread and old pennies. I can hear the whistle from the rails if the wind remembers to deliver it. I think about the cases I put to bed and the ones that still turn over in their sleep. I think about my bailiff from way back, the one who told me on my second week, "When a child's welfare is in question, you follow the paper trail and your gut." Both will testify I think about the lanyard under the linen and the way Maya asked me not to look. She has asked me for lots of promises since she learned how to make them. Promise we'll have waffles on Saturday. Promise you won't sing during the school play. Promise you'll let me sleep with the dog when it storms. I keep most of them and bend the rest like a willow so we can both be right. The good promises hold shape because they're built from the kind of wood that learned which way to grow before the wind took a vote. At church the next morning, I lit a candle for the simple notion that we can be taught by what almost harms us without courting it again for the thrill. I lit another for the volunteers who carry microphones and make them sound like hands, not weapons. A third, selfish one, for the old houses that creak exactly where they need to, so you will fix what creaks in you during daylight. A woman I didn't recognize approached me after the service. She was the kind of stranger who already knows 3 things about you and is deciding which 2 to say out loud. "I wanted to thank you for what you did at the inn," she said. "My niece was there that night. She told me she felt like the room listened to itself for once." "That's a lovely way to put it," I said. "We don't give rooms enough credit." "You gave it a job," she said, "and then you let it do it." The county fair rolled around in August, and a man with a ribbon pinned to his lapel asked me to help judge pies. "We'll give you a badge," he said. "I've had my fill," I told him. He laughed, not getting it, and that was fine. Not everything needs to be carried by a crowd. Later that week, we went back to the Riverstone for a small lunch. It was a test I needed to give the air. You can love a place and demand better of it at the same time. That's marriage. That's parenthood. That's citizenship. Arturo saw us from the pass and lifted his chin in hello. Mrs. Whitcomb came to our table with a smile that met me halfway and shook my hand like a colleague's. She told Maya that they had new pens for the kids' menus that wouldn't smudge, and she told me they had tightened their badge policies and retrained the entire front-of-house team on what it means to say no well and early. "Thank you," I said. "No," she answered. "Thank you." I've been doing this long enough to know I'd rather be embarrassed by a microphone once than live with the quiet shame of almost. I cut my salad as if there were a right geometry to it and laughed at something Maya said. For a few seconds, I forgot the heavy parts and let the lighter ones prove they could carry their own weight. On another morning, Caleb found me clipping back the tomato vines behind the house. He stood at the garden gate without opening it. Our old rule about entering somebody else's work, broken if you step in without being invited. The sun made his face look like he'd finally slept longer than worry, and I realized my shoulders had dropped in a way they hadn't in a month. "I ended it," he said. He didn't have to say what. I made a list of things I have to be for my daughter, and then I compared it to the list of things I'd been for a woman. It was shorter. I didn't like that. "Grief drives us to strange cities," I said. "You went there and looked around. You got back in one piece. That's more than some do." He nodded. "I'm going to sign up for the parent volunteer rotation on Fridays. The reading hour. And the snack cart if they'll let me. You'll be everyone's favorite," I said. "Pack napkins and patience." We stood in the smell of crushed tomato leaves, which is a kind of green you can't buy. The cicadas did what cicadas do when they decide to make their announcement in layers. The dog nosed the gate and then settled because he knows as much about rules as anybody in the valley. If you are lucky enough to have a tiny square of ground where things grow, you also have a chance to practice stewardship on something that does not talk back unless it is dying. People assume courtrooms taught me those habits. The garden reminds me more often. Sometimes, late at night, I replay the opening moments of that gala in my head and consider the version of the evening where I told Maya I promised and meant it. We would have sat through dessert. The room would have clapped at the right times. Photos would have captured our best angles. We would have ridden home quietly, and I would have made tea, and a small wrong would have slipped like a spider into a crack and built a secret place to live. Instead, a child asked me not to look under the linen, and I didn't make that promise. I looked. I found a bright piece of plastic out of place in the dark, and the night unspooled from there in the direction it needed to go. The names in this story could be changed without losing the point of it. The town could be different. The river could be another river. People repeat themselves with small variations and great hopes. There will always be rooms where charm tries to overrule attention, and someone counts under their breath to keep the thunder from getting too close too fast. If I have anything left to offer after all these years of listening, it's this. When a child's whisper contradicts the song the room is playing, let the whisper choose the melody. Let the room listen to itself. Let your promises be to the person you want to be, not the person someone else expects, because the person you want to be is the only one small hands can hold. Weeks passed, then months, and the Hudson did what rivers do, reminded us that forward is a direction you don't negotiate. Fall pulled red and gold up the hills and let them go, and winter tested whether we meant what we said about staying. We kept going to the library on Saturdays. We let the dog teach us his ethics about naps. We learned to be less polite to certain narratives. When the world asked us for a picture, we offered a conversation instead. One night, the wind pushed leaves along the curb so they sounded like shy applause. Maya climbed into my lap even though she was too long-legged for it now and asked if we could make waffles in the morning. Yes, I said, and meant the kind of promise that starts small and ends big. She traced the line of my hand with her finger, the way children do when they're listening to themselves ask for something. Grandma? Yes, love. Why did you know the card under the table was wrong? I thought about that for a while because you should when a child you love asks you a question with the word, why in it? Because it didn't belong to us and it was pretending it did, I said. She nodded, satisfied. That's how you know when one of my socks sneaks into the drawer with the mittens. It's the same skill, I said, and we both laughed because truth hides in ridiculous places and reveals itself when you give it a corner of a grin to stand on. I do not know if I will ever love microphones again, but I know what my voice is for. It isn't for scolding or shining. It's for the moment a room is half asleep and needs someone to nudge it toward the right dream. It's for bending a promised shape back the way it was meant to be. It's for counting softly when the storm comes, so a child can learn the pace of it and learn that between flash and noise, there is a space where someone will hold their hand and say, "We will do this my way," which is to say, the way that keeps you here for more pancakes. One more story, one more morning where the only parade is the butter sliding across the top of something you made together. When I tucked Maya into bed that night, the teal band lay smooth against her skin. She looked at it and then at me and said, "Just right," the way some people say amen. I turned off the lamp and left the hallway light on so the house could find its way to its own rest. The Riverstone held another gala the following year with a new theme and better training and, if you looked closely, staff moving with the kind of attention that makes showmanship honest. I sat near the back with my good shoes on and a promise to myself to keep quiet unless quiet felt like a lie. It never did. When the dessert parade began, the trays flashed like little suns, and no one hesitated over them. I watched faces, not plates. I watched hands. I watched a room act like a town. It is not the most dramatic thing I've ever seen. It might be the most beautiful. On our way out, a girl not much older than Maya tugged at my sleeve. "Thank you," she said, and I knew she didn't know exactly for what. That's the way with gratitude. It spills. It finds its own shore. I told her she was welcome and that the room had done it, not me. She tilted her head like a bird does when it hears something it wants to remember. When we got home, I checked the back door twice and smiled at myself because the world loves to convince us that security is a ritual. It's not. Security is attention. Security is the hands we put on the small of a child's back when a room is bigger than their courage. It is the sound of a band against a pulse. It is an orange rectangle in a place where linen should only be linen, and a woman who knows better than to promise not to look, where her gut tells her the truth is waiting, plain as daylight, in the dark.